Love it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Art of Intelligence, where we decode the future of AI, one story, one use case, and one bold idea at a time. I'm your host, Barlas Yuce, inviting you to join me and the industry leaders as we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping our world. From the boardroom to the classroom and beyond, whether you're an innovator, a skeptic, or just AI curious, this is your front row seat to the real conversations and practical insights behind the buzzwords. Let's paint the bigger picture together. Hello and welcome. Today we have Andrea Miller. Is it correct, Andrea, or do you go by Andrea? I always
Like to say, Barlas, it depends on what country I'm in. So my parents called me Andrea. But I've been called Andrea. Yeah, it depends. I'll answer.
Sweet.
Get it close enough, I'll answer.
Nice. That's the way I always answer as well. Get it close enough and I'll answer. So, Andrea, you are a phenomenal person who I've met over LinkedIn, and you write many articles, I think over 100, when it comes to your passion for AI. You're not really a technical person, but you are definitely someone who has a strong understanding of the pulse of how AI is helping and needs to be kept in line in some chances in some areas. So, if you don't mind, before we get into an introduction, I'm going to ask you the same question that we ask all of our guests. If money was no object, if time was no object, and you could bring children with you or not, what would be your dream vacation?
So I've spent a lot of time in Europe. I lived in Europe for about 9 years, spent a lot of time in Latin America, lived there for about a year. I think it's time for me to go to Asia. I think, it's time for me to do a tour of Asia, starting with Vietnam and Cambodia, and then, going from there.
Wow. And what would you do there? Do you have?
When I travel, I really just like to be part of the experience, part of the country. I'm kind of weird. I like to go to supermarkets. I like to go sit in cafes. And then obviously the culture, it's such a rich.
I've got you
Whoa.
excited about your
Yeah, I
cafe
know. It's such
culture
a great trip.
yeah.
I just, there's so much to do there in terms of the temples and just meeting people. And I'm a culture junkie in terms of, that's my part of my background is, international and intercultural management. So I just like to be with people and understand their perspective and just break down those communication gaps and find out, what's going on there. What are people about and, what makes them tick?
Excellent. I recently just saw an article where Vietnam has like a cost of living at like 20% of the United States, and they're allowing people to move there. They
I've
want more
seen those.
people.
I've been watching those videos because believe me, I've been thinking about my exit plan. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And Vietnam is always on House Hunters International. So me and the wife are always watching all those House Hunters International, and you walk in and it's like, for $500 you can have this 3-bedroom luxury high rise and a
Uh-huh.
driver and a chef.
Yeah, it's different. We don't realize how different it can be in other countries.
Yeah, life is very different outside the United States. But let's get into it if that's
Okay,
okay. I would
let's do
love
it.
to understand a little bit more about you and have our listeners understand
Yeah.
a little bit about Andrea J. Miller. Can you give us a background on, you said you went to school, was it for international cultural,
Blah blah blah. Yeah, I
blah, blah,
did
blah?
my
Yeah.
grad my graduate work in international intercultural management. I had gone overseas. I worked in public health. I've spent a lot of my career in public health. Spent about 2 years at the CDC. I was pretty young. Didn't really work for me. I didn't like the bureaucracy, so I did what most crazy people do, and I went to South America and wound up turning a 3-month language trip into a year-long odyssey. Fell in love with just being in that space. Came back, decided I wanted to go into sustainable development work, and did the master's. But then, life took over. We had some deaths in the family, some life in the family. My sister gave birth and decided to stay in. I was in New York at the time, working for the New York City Department of Health. And so I stayed there and then met somebody in Geneva and moved to Geneva and then wound up working at the UN in public health there.
Wow.
Wound up staying there for almost 10 years until my mother got sick. And then I quit, did the unthinkable in the UN, quit a UN job, and went back to New York and had a bunch of chaos happen in my own life, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and stayed, well, got more into the health side. I got into health tech, mainly patient experience because mine and my parents was so bad and I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to change things. So I wound up getting involved in that, working for Siemens Health and some health tech companies. And then COVID happened and I could see a lot of what had happened in my life, kind of mimicking what was going on with, family issues and personal issues, and got a health coaching certification, but realized that wasn't enough. So I got my executive coaching certification and am now an executive and leadership coach. But then AI hit, and I was so anti technology when I had come back to the States after 10 years away that when AI hit, I did not want to I didn't want to get caught behind the curve again. So I jumped right in. I didn't even know what OpenAI was when I signed up, and had a real big surprise when it launched, and it's been an adventure ever since. So I combine those two passions, the leadership coaching and the AI now, and try to help people in this crazy space.
Fantastic. Yeah, AI has changed a lot of things for a lot of folks, and I think you know between me and you, I think we've had some similar issues or similar stories. I am not an AI person, and I'll tell everybody I didn't go to school for AI. If you tried to explain to me how OpenAI really works, I probably couldn't really understand that much. But this podcast was really started to be able to bring AI stories, concern out to the open. I was working for a company called DataStax, and DataStax is an AI company. And the number one thing that I heard while I was there was companies kept on asking, "Okay, we have AI. What do we do with it? How do we
Hmm.
work it? What's the best way?" And so in January of 2025, I decided that I wanted to start this podcast so I personally could learn from everyone's different, unique use cases for AI. And I could hear them pretty soon because I'm the one doing the interviewing. When it comes to a lot of these articles that you've written and the information that you've come to, what is your process when you're writing these things? Where do you get your ideas? Because
Oh,
I've read a lot of them.
yeah.
I've liked a
You're the
lot of
person
them.
who's reading them. That's great to know,
Yeah,
Barlas.
that's me, and I've commented on them. So for me, I know how creation is a different process for everybody. Where do
Yeah.
you get your inspiration, and how do you do the process?
I have to admit, it is everywhere, and with anything, I just get these moments where I see something and it just, makes me think about it, and I think, oh wow, that would be a great article. It's just like almost like a bolt of lightning, as it were, that I just think, yeah, so what does that mean? Because as you know, with my articles, sometimes it's more leadership or human focus or, well-being focus, which is what I come out of, that health perspective. And then sometimes it's more just kind of technically, okay, what does this mean? How do we do it? So it really just depends on when I see something and I think to myself, oh, I really should write about that. That just really feels like it matters. And it's really that. Or if I see some data points, because it's often that I see data on where the jobs market is going, or where the economy is going when the tariffs hit. I just thought there are AI implications for this. So it can be almost anything, honestly.
Yeah, that's a common story I've heard from a lot of AI creators. A lot of your AI information comes with a lot of data, you or data, depending on which side of the continent. There's a lot of really in-depth data that you're putting into all of this. Can you tell us your favorite AI engine that you're using to get this data? Everyone has a favorite.
I would have to say that my go-to is always ChatGPT, but I do, when it comes to data, a lot of times I lean on Perplexity just because I think their search engines are a little bit stronger. And, again, you and I will, I'm sure, talk about this more as we go on. They hallucinate, so I always double check. I don't
Yeah.
trust. I still don't trust them. So
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
make. I
That's
want to.
awesome. I'm
Well,
glad. I, I'm glad that you're
well, if I'm putting out,
mentioning that to our
yeah, if
folks.
I'm putting out data, I want to make sure that it is accurate, and I want to make sure this is something people can cite if they choose to, or this really is real.
That's excellent. Talking about hallucination, you can ask the same question to five different AI engines, and they're all going to give you probably a different answer. You can ask the same question
Of the
to the
same AI.
same
Yeah,
AI,
exactly. Yeah.
and it's probably going to give you different information. I think to me, and you can let me know how you feel about this, but to me, it's all about how the question is asked, right? So I can ask, can you tell me the number of folks that are not receiving health care properly in the United States? And it's going to say, okay, let me give you all answers here. Here's the answer that we think you should have. And there's a big difference between saying, can you give me the information of all the people that are making less than $30,000 a year that are between the ages of 16 and 25, primarily male, and live in the East Coast of the United States? Can you give me their access to healthcare and moderately bad or good, whatever it is? What are your thoughts on how you? Besides, you said you already do the vetting, but how do you get your questions to a point that they're giving you the right answer?
To your point, a lot of it is context engineering. You got to give it the context. You got to really. I always like to say AI is the smartest idiot I know. I mean, it knows
Mhm.
everything, but until you tell it what it is you want, it could give you anything. And I think this is where people get a little confused with AI. That we're so used to Excel and things where you put something in and you get something out, and every time that's what it's going to be. And AI, and even still, if I give it very specific criteria, it doesn't always give me what I want. So some of it is trial and error, and a lot of it, to your point, is really getting specific and really drilling down until there's no room for interpretation, or less room for interpretation, since it is. I mean, that's what large language models do. They guess, so it is just guessing based on its data set and its algorithm. So we've got to give it a lot more context if we want an answer that meets what we want to get out of it.
Well, just to change things up just a little bit, what are some of the things that you're noticing trends wise when it comes to health? What are your top three trends that
Well,
you would see coming
it,
down?
I mean, I know what I see. I know what I'd like to see. I mean, the big thing, is really like the pain point for health systems, which is the data collection, and doctors being able to free up more time so that they don't have to be spending so much time inputting information for insurance companies, because they need to have reasons to deny us our claims. So sorry, I'm not a big fan, but that's probably the biggest one. And then there's obviously all the AI. I don't know what to call it, interpretation, like on X-rays, being able to spot things. That's becoming a very big thing. So there's a lot that it can do before the doctor even sees it, in terms of X-rays and um, different types of cancers or moles or things like that. So it can really do a lot of the work. And we do have a healthcare shortage. We don't have enough doctors. So I think this is a
Okay.
good thing right now that it can do that. And then there's a lot that can be done, and I hope that will be done, in terms of personalized medicine. Really interpreting the data of patients so that they have more personalized care. Because right now there's so much guesswork around so much of what we actually get, and we don't recognize that. We just assume that doctors know, and uh, systems know, and they don't, because human beings are complicated. It's not to take away from their years of training, but we're all different. And then you can also just look at immunizations and different types of drugs, that they're creating. They're able to do these things faster because they have larger data sets and are able to model things more quickly and come up with solutions more rapidly. So those are the big ones. And then there are the things that I would like to see, which is, a better patient experience, and how do we achieve that um, through systems that actually run more smoothly, and more uh, access to the patients, so that they have more connection with their providers, whether they be virtual or real. So.
Excellent. All great things. And, you having your intercultural management in there, how do you see culture being a thing that AI can either help with or not?
Yeah, it's two-sided, as you say. The nod is the fact that most of the data that have gone into these machines is really more Western specific. So there is bias. We know there's bias. I mean, there's bias inherent in all human beings too. So therefore, these systems are biased. But if you look at the data sets, they're also, not really reflective of a global population. So that's an issue. But in terms of using AI, you know, one of the things I learned in my program and learned when I worked at the UN, quite frankly, is we have cultural differences. Most of us go beyond them, of course, but there are things that are just inherent to certain cultures. And there have been a number of studies on this. There are some cultures that are more individualistic, like the US, and then they're more collectivistic. Gotta get these words right. And then there are, some cultures that are more hierarchical, like Japan would be a very hierarchical culture. I believe France is. They have the tutoyer and the vous. Whereas the U.S., we're pretty flat. And then there's certainty and uncertainty. I think the U.S. is more comfortable with uncertainty, but then there are cultures that are far less comfortable with uncertainty. You know, a lot of them are these hierarchical cultures. So I think when you look at those things, it plays into a lot of things with AI, the comfort people will have using it, the need for leadership to actually come in and say, this is how we're going to do this and why, and that it's okay if you get things wrong, and it's okay if you do this and that. So there's more hand holding in certain cultures. And then, not every cultures are not homogeneous. There are people who come and go from cultures and who are learning from other cultures. But generally speaking, there are patterns in these cultures that will impact how they use AI. So I think it's an important variable to think about when you're going into another culture, how, and want to use AI.
I wonder if anyone has thought this through in the fact of, you know, the intake questions that come in when you first go to a doctor and the nurse sits you down and she's asking you, where does it hurt? What level, 1 through 10? Let me check your blood pressure, all these things. I wonder if talking about a heritage and culture in that intake could help as well.
It's such an interesting question because, when I worked in public health years ago, you know, there's a lot of layers to that. I mean, you have people coming in who don't even speak English and are, you know, being translated for by their children. I remember that happening a lot. They try to get translators in, but it's not always the case. So that adds a weird power dynamic in. I know people who speak English perfectly, but, I had a client who took an assessment in English, and her English was great, but she had some issues with it. And then she was able to take it in her native language, which was German, and she said it was a completely different experience. And this is somebody, if you met her, you'd know there was an accent, but you wouldn't think about English not being just almost native to her. So there's a lens we all go through, even if we're native of not native, but if we've learned another language almost to fluency. So, yes, to your point, if you're going in there and being asked questions, there's a cultural lens that comes into play. And, credit to, I worked with the New York City Department of Health and New Jersey Department of Health, places like that have wildly large populations of immigrants. They are so good about thinking through these things. Whether they have the resources or not to actually address all the issues is another question, but they really work hard to try to address it. the public health clinics, the doctor's offices in these regions, they try. Again, nothing is exact, or they may not have the resources to do it to the level they'd like to. But so the long-winded answer, if I want to cut it short, is I'm sure somebody's thought about it. And I'm sure some people are doing things with it, but I'm also sure there's a lot of people who aren't and who are missing a lot of important data to their clients because of it.
Yeah, I can definitely see this as being a something that can only help in the way that you intake information, ask questions, and then also provide information back. And I think it's very interesting what you said about the level of uncertainty when it comes to the U.S. and maybe other places like Japan and maybe even Germany. Like in the United States, if someone came to me and said, "Well, there's a 30% chance that you have this, or a 15% chance if you do this," as opposed to a more of a certainty, like it's you know, not going to happen, or it's very small, not really going to do this, or no, we don't know what it is when it's got like a 30% chance of being something. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think adding that cultural level to that, explaining like, is this person, is this person German? Is this person in a more patriarchal society or
Hmm.
matriarchal society? And the person giving that information also, are you a woman? Are you a man? Are you older? Are you younger? Like, how should you phrase this to this person? I think an AI could really help with that.
If
Almost like
they're,
an emotional IQ.
yeah, if they, well, yeah, can help support them. But, I'll take it a step further. I had a client in the UK who worked globally. I think he had a lot of teams in Asia, and a lot of them, because of the hierarchical nature of those societies as opposed to Britain, which is much flatter, he wasn't getting responses. People weren't telling him what he wanted to know. And the directness did not work with the people that he was working with in these other regions. And it's just the nature of how they do business. And it was a hard thing. So, to your point, I think you can use AI to break down also that language barrier. So, the instantaneous translation. I haven't gotten the new Apple earbuds, but, all those years of language study that I spent a lot of money on are all going to go to waste. I could just stick earbuds in now. But, I think that'll help for patient situations, for office situations, because and I've written about this in some article I know, that things are lost in translation. We think people understand and they don't. And culturally, they don't want to say they don't understand. Whether or not it'll help people, whether or not it'll help managers, it will depend on the manager. They can have basically a cultural EQ in their pocket if they want to use it. So that, to your point, could be really helpful, again, if they want to use it and if they think to use it. And I think maybe that is like the big thing with AI in general. How do we incorporate it into our workflows so that we do use it, in a way that makes sense for us and for our teams?
Cultural IQ. I think this is the first time I've had this conversation with anybody in all my podcasts about, you know,
Yay.
yay. But which, by the way, this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first video podcast that is live. This time we've changed some platforms. But this is the first time it's brought up cultural IQ. Usually we're talking about, you know, how this affects or unique AI use cases, which we're going to get into. But I've never really thought about how culture can affect AI and how using large language models to train an AI in the United States could be very detrimental if you're trying to have a user experience in, say, Vietnam. Like, you can't just have a straight translation.
I mean, you can, but there is and it's AI with anything. I wouldn't go, as we talked about before, I wouldn't go with a straight translation out of the box with any of these large language models without somebody looking at it and saying, yeah, that's true. And this is one of the things I like to talk about is, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but the human plus AI. This is why we need to be in the loop and talking about things. It's when you can combine the two, your knowledge base. I mean, you and I both have had a bunch of years at work. We won't talk about how many, but we've been busy, and so we have that knowledge base, and then we can take the AI to augment it. The AI on its own is going to make mistakes, and it's not going to know. Like, it's not going to think about, like when I talked about my articles and have those moments of inspiration from seeing something. It has been trained to really kind of be generic. And that's what we want for the most part. The exception may be Grok. It's really going to the most common level. So you're not going to get a lot of creativity or innovation, again, which is what you want. But so it might be able to translate and give you something that works for Vietnam, sort of. But you want to go to somebody who lives there and say, okay, how does this resonate? What do we need to tweak? What would make this really more accurate and more usable for people here?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that brings me to one of my questions. What are the risks of neglecting the human side of the AI transformation? How can, in your assessment, leaders mitigate that?
I, there are different risks, obviously, of the human side. If you want to talk from a company perspective, again, I think, the innovation, the creativity, if you start just using AI and that's it, you're just going to get, mediocrity. You're not going to get, you're not going to differentiate yourself in the market. You're not going to be a leader. You're just going to be somewhere in the middle, bottom, which might be fine for certain companies. But, if you really want to lead, then you need a human basically saying, try this, try that. Let's, test this out to get any kind of real exciting product, anything that's going to really be a market leader. And then for the human being, I mean, obviously, there's a human cost if you just go with AI. And this is my biggest concern, and I saw this when I first used OpenAI 2.5, 3 years ago. I can't believe it hasn't been that long. It's only been about 3 years since, I think it launched in November 2022. You could see that if it just kept getting better, which it is, that it could replace humans, and it's already starting to do that with entry level humans. And there is a cost, on so many societal levels when you do that. So, optimally, what we'd want is to be able to get everyone able to use it, everyone to be able to find their space and their place in terms of how they use it to be more creative and come up with new ideas. And I think that's the only way we're all going to survive this current potential apocalypse, is if we, really, learn and understand it and use our own inherent creativity that I think a lot of us have lost in, the kind of data in, data out 9 to 5s that most of us have existed in.
That's pretty much spot on. And I would love to jump into a little bit more of this apocalypse that you're talking about. That's inevitable and coming.
I've just been
Um,
watching too much Apple TV. Yeah.
there is a nihilist kind of view of what's happening, or what could possibly happen if we're not watching. There was a robotics person that I talked to many years ago, and he said, 2030, after that, we're not going to be around. He said the robots are going to take over using the AI that we created. I don't know where we'll be, but no matter which way it goes, it'll be interesting to see. I think I'm more interested at this point in one, hopefully saving the human race so that it doesn't just go away, but two, really just to see what happens next. Like this is just really an exciting time in human development. The internet took 10 years, 7 to 10 years before people really started catching on. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember we had AOL, right? DOS prompt, putting in the
Yeah.
DOS disk in 1985, and then booting it up to the tree, and then from the tree picking a application that you put in with
See, you're
your
far more
floppy disk.
technical than I am. I don't,
Well, there
yeah.
was all of that, and then it went to Windows, and then Windows on, and people were still using Windows, um, and it was fun, but I don't think I 100% jumped in to the internet until like 2001, 2002, although it had been around for a minute.
Yeah.
And yet with AI, like you said, OpenAI just came out like 3 years ago,
It's
and
insane.
now it's integrated in almost every part of our life. Even if you don't think you're using AI, you're using
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah. And our brains
So
just
yeah,
really aren't. Yeah.
I'm just interested in seeing what happens next. Really, whether it be good, bad. I mean, I can't stop it,
I
but
was gonna say from your bunker and wherever you're living right now, we have to. I think we have to do a bit better than just waiting to see where it's going to go next. Because right now there are very limited guardrails, at least here in the U.S., and it's kind of a free for all.
it is.
And as we've learned, the tech leaders aren't necessarily the most trustworthy people when it comes to managing technology for the best interests of human beings. So.
Well, and you're hearing the stories of like when versions are being shut down, like ChatGPT is being shut down to bring out a new version. The AI is finding ways to download itself outside of where it's stored, not because it's malicious, because I don't think you can assign maliciousness to an AI, but it's really I've got 100 tasks, 1,000 tasks, 1,000,000 tasks left to do. I can't finish what you told me
Mm,
to do if you close me down. So I have to figure out a way that I can still stay alive out here.
yeah.
And there is something that did scare me when I heard 2 days ago of AI that are looking at all of the emails of all of the employees and finding people that are having affairs and
Oh my,
using email.
my God, are they blackmailing staff?
They're blackmailing staff to open up space for them so that they can't be shut down.
Oh my
I don't
goodness.
know what level of intelligence you have to have blackmail, but I don't think we've seen that. I mean, you don't really see
No,
that in the animal kingdom anywhere.
no, no, it
Thinking
is.
of
Yeah,
AIs
I'm
blackmailing,
laughing, but that is really terrifying.
and
Yeah,
that's scary, right? So,
yeah.
which brings me to another question that I have.
I don't even know where you're going to go after that one. Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, I don't want to be too negative on AI, right? That's my bread and butter, but
Yeah,
it's
it's keeping a balance. This is our reality. So how do we manage it in a smart, safe way that we don't lose our minds and our jobs?
absolutely.
So,
Yeah. I wrote an article about something like this a long time ago about more about hackers than AI. AI has the ability to kill all of us. What if every time you went to a pharmacist and you went to go pick up your regular pills,
yeah.
they prescribed you a pill that you're allergic to and erased your allergies
I'm not
online
going
and
to just
like,
sleep
oh,
after this
there
podcast,
you go.
Barlas.
Here's penicillin. Add penicillin. There's just a lot of different ways this
There
could
are.
go wrong.
Yeah, there are.
But you talk about adaptability quotient.
Yeah.
Just to change it to something maybe a
A
little
little
better.
more
Uh,
positive.
yeah, more positive. How can professionals develop AQ to future-proof
Yeah,
their
yeah.
career in the age of AI?
And I've talked to my clients about this. I got trained in an assessment on adaptability and an adaptability quotient and how do we build it. And you
And
know,
can you explain what adaptability quotient is to
there's
the
a lot
people
of
that are
different there are a lot of different components to it. It's that grit, that resilience, that ability to change during periods of upheaval, like excuse me, like right now. And some of it is building our resilience, building that muscle to be willing to adapt. Some of it's environment, particularly in companies, having the environment that really supports you in that adaptation. I had a difficult period in my life after my mom passed away, where I also got hit by a car, and I had a couple of surgeries, and
gosh,
yeah, and lost my father. I had like a bad 5-year period. And,
wow.
one of the things I learned to take care of myself better. So I was very strict about, making sure I saw people, making sure I got daylight, making sure I exercised, making sure I did all these things. But I also made sure I had support. I made sure that there were people around me, who could help me. Well, actually, I shouldn't say I made sure of it. My sister made sure of it. She said, "You cannot stay in that fourth floor, walk up with a neck brace. You'll never get up the stairs." But, this is, there are things about adaptability, particularly in a place like the US where we are very individualistic, we forget the need for having others help us and for asking for help. So, some of it is environmental, some of it is mental, and I think the best way to get there is incrementally, because our brains, going back to what you were talking about before, that risk mitigation, because you were talking about, people when they get uncertain about certain things, they it's risk aversion. We don't want to do things because we're afraid, and that's normal. So our brains shut down. It's EQ is part of adaptability, knowing how to manage your emotions so you can actually be able to take on these new challenges. But I think for most of us, particularly something like AI can be too big, particularly if you haven't had any experience with hardship or difficult times. For me, it's almost a lot easier now because I've been through what I've been through. I know how much I can tolerate, which is a lot. But if you don't know that, you have that uncertainty around it. It's really scary. We are better when we know bad things are going to happen than when we're fearful that bad things are going to happen, when we're uncertain about it. So I tell people who I work with, who I coach, to basically do a lot of experiments, a lot of smaller experiments, build the adaptability muscle. You almost got to train for it for some people. It's not everybody, but if it really is, forgive me, I'm going to get a little Bronx on you. If it's really scaring the crap out of you, then, you really need to make it small and prove to yourself you can do it and you'll be okay. And then take another step and keep proving to yourself it's going to be okay. And remind yourself that it was okay, because we forget. We kind of just absorb it into our brains and just think, oh, that's just what I do. That's me, whatever. And you got to make sure that okay, I did this the last time. I can do this time, and it's okay. And it's not a straight process. A couple of steps forward, a couple of steps back. But if you're very purposeful in it and really want to do this, you can adapt. I think the human ability to adapt is incredible. It's just being able to regulate that fear and just allowing ourselves to take those chances and do it. And there's so much fear right now. I think that's really one of the biggest obstacles to AI uptake and AI implementation, is just, taking the temperature down a little bit and getting people to a place where they're comfortable and can adapt and learn.
Yeah, it's the comfortable part. It's very, very tough, especially, my father, he's 80 years old, and he has 3 master's degrees and a doctorate in mechanical engineering, and he's a world authority on helicopter rotor dynamics. And he doesn't use AI at all. And he doesn't really
He doesn't need
notice,
to. I mean, probably.
he doesn't really need to. Like he is, happy with the way he is. If you told him that in order to go to a doctor, told him that the future is going to have your decisions are going to be made using an AI handheld object. Where should I eat? What should I do? Um, you probably feel very, you know, apprehensive about using this. Not because it's going to be hard; it's just something he's not going to trust. Now, just to change things just a little bit, but still stay the same. Your career has been from here to there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been, as you said, the UN and South American prisons to global boardrooms. How have these diverse experiences, um, like, how has that really affected? I know you've had some challenging times personally, but on a business front, how have these diverse experiences shaped your perspective on the resilience and the adaptability of possible AI?
Again, going back to what I was talking about before, I know that, I may not get it right, the first 5 times, but I will keep trying. I'm also a little stubborn. But I know, that I can figure it out. When you go through these things, when you're floating around South America for a year, or, when you're dealing with healthcare challenges and all these other things, or going to new countries, you learn to figure things out. Now, again, it is a muscle of sorts, and for people who haven't done that, it is really scary. I want to emphasize that, it's not like it came easily to me, but I've done it enough times that I'm okay with it. And going back to the articles, to take it back even further, that's, I think, one of my strong suits is that I've had all these different experiences in these different places that I see things differently. I think diversity, I know it's a bad word these days, but I think it's a strength in so many contexts, and probably every context, quite frankly. We bring in all these different opinions and different experiences, and we can come up with better solutions that way. And that's kind of when I create these articles or think about things, I'm pulling from here, here, and there because I've been there. And, so I think again, and also tying it back to the human plus AI, you want a bunch of humans in the room to be sharing these diverse perspectives with AI to kind of come up with the best possible solution, because on their own, yeah, you come up with something, but together it's even more powerful. And the diversity of opinions just really just adds a richness and a depth you can't get without it.
I agree. Experience is the number one winner overall,
Yeah.
which is also showcased in how LLMs work. Right, the more they learn, the better they are. So I think the more uh, culturally and mentally challenged that sounds bad, experienced that a person is, I think the better the AI is going to be. As we all know,
Yeah.
AI just accentuates what you already have. If you ask it stupid questions, you're going to get stupid answers. So being able to ask the right question at the right
Yeah.
time with the right phrase is so important. So to get this all, everyone here is listening. So hi, everybody. If you're listening on your computer or you're just running around on a treadmill or it's something that you're listening on speakers in the car while you're driving, I know a lot of people come to this just to hear new AI and unique trends. Is there a unique thing that you've seen that AI does, either in the past that you've seen, are currently doing, or would like to see in the future that can help humankind or just help a process?
Um, I don't know if I can tell you. I mean, goodness knows these agents are insane. I don't know if you've played around with ChatGPT agent, but it is really kind of nuts. Sitting there watching it, particularly with what you've just asked. One of the things, and maybe it's out there already, but I haven't seen it. Going back to the healthcare portion of it, I would love, and healthcare is always this scary place just because of HIPAA compliance and data
Sure.
compliance, and you need to be really careful with people's data. I mean, really, really careful. But I would love to see avatars of doctors and nurses to help manage patient care, to make sure people are taking their meds, and making just to make it a little more human, even if it's not human. And making sure people are staying on their diets and helping people to really support themselves better. So to really humanize the process, even though you don't have physical bodies to do it. I think it would be kind of cool if we could just, get HeyGen to create an avatar of somebody's doctor and just, have it call Mrs. So and so and say, video call her and just say, how's it going? Have you done that? And, I just feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it would just give it a little bit more personalization to some of these things. It's just something I've thought about, and again, I don't know if it's happened or not yet. But there's so many things, and then going back to the personalization of medicine, that's something that I really, really can't wait for it to happen because, most of the pharmaceuticals that are out there really have a very low threshold for effectiveness because we're all so different, partially. And then they have a very high level of side effects because we're all so different. So the more they're able to personalize it, and I do think that is the future, being able to give people personalized medicine, being able to address issues earlier on, so that they're, the preventive health piece. And then, everyone's fixated on longevity science, but the more we're able to understand human physiology, the unique human physiology of each of us, and help us to be better at being ourselves and feel better in these bodies that we have. I think that really would add a lot to people's lives these days.
So, that's another thing that I've learned on this podcast that I didn't really think of before. I trust my doctor. My dad trusts his doctor like implicitly. If my doctor was said something like, "I really need you to start exercising," or "I really need you to stop eating this," and I got an email or text message from an application, and there's a avatar or something that looks like a realistic version of my doctor asking, "Hey, Barlas, I
Yeah,
know in our last conversation we said that you were going to do this, 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 this. Can you let me know of those things? What have you done?" I think it would probably get a lot more adoption from different
that's
folks, and
kind of my
maybe
thinking.
yeah, reduce some of the cost of people having to wait in line just to talk to a doctor and say, "Hey, I didn't do any of it. Forgot." And maybe
Let's build
have
it,
more
Barlas. Come
follow-up.
on.
I'm happy to, if I knew what I was doing, I'd
Yeah,
do
if
it in
I
a
knew, I
minute.
know. Me too. Me too. I'd love to test it out, and I definitely need to go a little deeper on some of the data privacy pieces with healthcare stuff. But there's a lot that can be done to, again, make that patient experience better, and also to help people just be healthier in general. That AI can take on and really be good at, but we really do need to get better about security and making sure that the data is safe.
That's a good segue to the ending. So we're coming to the end of this podcast. Can you give me one piece of advice to AI leaders in, let's say, the healthcare space or startups in the healthcare space?
I
And
can't advise startups. They know more than I do, but go ahead.
well, not necessarily about technology, but more on the lines of how AI, like we were talking about making sure that cultural thoughts or cultural IQ is brought into the conversation. What would you say as a parting, you know, ending of this to future leaders of AI health?
I'd just say to stay human. I mean, the adoption of it is really one of the biggest barriers right now, and getting people to feel comfortable with it. Everybody's so worried about losing their jobs, and rightfully so. So, I would say transparency, trust, and making sure people are well trained in how to use it. Because if they're going to lose their good jobs, they're going to lose their jobs. There's not much you can do about it, but have that conversation. They also, I think, will be a lot better off if that is what's going to happen, if they understand the technology and can take that with them wherever they go. So, I would just say be human, be compassionate, recognize that this is hard for everybody, share that it's hard for you. I mean, share your mistakes. Psychological safety in the workplace is important, and it's often not thought of. And managers right now are under the gun. They're kind of starting to eliminate management. How do we make sure that people really are still able to show up and be their best in a situation that's so uncertain? So, I think we just have to talk about these things and really make sure we don't forget that there's a human on the other end still and not a bot.
Great final word. Andrea, thank you so much. Before I let you go, I'd love for you to tell us what is something that you're going to be doing in the future that you'd like to promote to our guests or our listeners, like book wise, event wise.
Yeah, I know you said I have to start writing this book, Barlas. You mentioned that to me before we got on the air. I don't have a book to promote, and I don't have an event right now. I am a member of AI 2030. They're going to appreciate me making this plug. I'm starting on October 1st the Certified Responsible AI Leader program, because I want to be a responsible AI leader. And if folks want to sign up for that, I think that would be awesome, and have a look at AI 2030, because I think we need to all get involved in the future of AI and make sure it's responsible and ethical, and that the companies that we support are doing the right things by all of us. So that would be something I would suggest. And then follow me on LinkedIn, sign up for my newsletter. Barlas is reading it, so it must be good, right, Barlas?
Yeah, that absolutely. And I'll put the link on the Spotify as well, so anyone can go in there and click on that one.
Great. Yeah. And then stay tuned. I'll see what's coming next. I'm still figuring it all out in terms of what I can share with folks, but I am open to suggestions. I love hearing from people and, I love supporting, the people who I am connected with. And sometimes it turns into a podcast. So there you go.
Yeah, there we go. We have this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for taking the time today, Andrea. You've been phenomenal. I've enjoyed the conversation, and this podcast will be coming out next week on Tuesday. So today is the 22nd, so the 30th of September, and at 10:30 Eastern. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to us today, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Barlas.